about for a long time. And I figured after that we could do an open discussion Q&A type thing. That sounds okay with everybody.
Okay.
So, another question. How many people were in my earlier panel with Peter?
Wanted to get in, but I couldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same.
I was this close to saying, I will pay you to kick someone out.
I was in the room.
Yeah, that was a good panel. We got some good discussion. So I'm hoping this will happen again.
I went up in the wrong line and ended up in the other thing.
So I mentioned in that panel that I'm not very involved in the Brony community or fandom or anything, and that's true. The Pony creator is used a lot, but I personally am not, so I don't know everything that goes on. So when I talk about things like My Little Pony, I'm not really talking as a Brony. I'm talking as someone who more generally just likes animation and well-written characters and stories and things like that, and also someone who likes to examine things like gender and how it relates to popular media and that kind of thing. I had the idea for this panel quite a while back, and it was in response to some not-so-great things I'd seen in the Brony community online, which since then I've seen a lot of very good things, so it's evened out a lot. I say evened out, I have a positive association with Bronies now. But I did just want to mention that this panel, two things. First of all, it's not only about My Little Pony, it's about gender and fandom in general and how that relates to My Little Pony. So I'll be talking about different things. And also, I'm approaching this not so much as a Brony. I'm approaching it first and foremost as someone who used to be a little girl. Because this show has two demographics of interest. The one it's aimed at, which is little girls, and the one it's got, which is mostly teenage to adult men, adult women too, of course, although it's not as big a deal if you're a woman like My Little Pony. So as someone who used to be a little girl, who has 3 little nieces and now a little nephew, and who wants to have children of her own one day, cartoons interest me because of the messages they send. And My Little Pony is certainly very interesting in that regard. I don't know if there's something going on.
Yeah.
Samus is a girl.
Peter? He's the con chair?
No, the one from earlier. The Asian guy?
Peter, the con chair, yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Alright, so the thing about any kind of analysis to pop culture in general, but especially cartoons, is you start talking about them and people are like, who cares? It's just for kids. You're overthinking it. Well, first of all, I think if you care about kids, then you care about the media they consume. And again, I am approaching this as someone who wants to have kids. I think about this stuff a lot, even though I don't have any yet. I'm preparing myself mentally for that day, and no amount of preparation will be enough, but you know, I'm making an effort. There's this, it's something I've noticed, and I don't think it's a radical statement or anything. People like to see themselves in the media they consume. Not exclusively. Like, you're not like, oh, only watch movies about whatever, but they do want to see something of themselves. And this is especially true, I think, for kids, because kids are, by definition, self-centered. I don't say that in a bad way. I say that in that they're still learning how to relate to other people, but they start with learning about themselves. But the fact of the matter is, if you are a certain kind of person, it's much easier to find representations of yourself in media. As related to this panel, if you are a guy, it is much easier to find guys in media to look up to relate to, that kind of thing, than it is for girls. And this is, I don't want to say especially true in kids' cartoons, but this is where we're starting with to relate to My Little Pony. Have any of you guys ever heard of the Dalchick?
Yes.
Love her. I might be borrowing some stuff she said, so if you recognize anything, it's from her. She did for those of you who don't know, she is an internet reviewer. She started out reviewing nostalgic girl stuff from like the 80s and all that kind of thing. She's branched out a lot. She doesn't just do girl stuff. Her videos have changed. But a lot of the stuff she talks about, she has this one video, called the Smurfette Principle. And it is the idea, most easily embodied in the Smurf, that when you have a group of characters in a cartoon, you have the one that's smart, the one that's brave, the one that's cowardly, the one that paints, the one that cooks, and the one that's a girl. That is her defining attribute. It's an interesting video. If this kind of stuff interests you at all, I suggest you look it up.
Feminist frequency is very good.
I know, I don't watch enough of her stuff. I need to start watching a lot more of her stuff. Feminist frequency too. But in that video, she displayed a chart that really interested me. It was a list of all the Nicktoons. Like not just cartoons on Nickelodeon, but the Nicktoons, the original programming, whatever. She had highlighted the ones that had female main characters. And it wasn't very many. I had no idea. So one of the things I did to prepare for this is I looked at, a lot of this is going from my childhood, because that's just, that's what I know as far as cartoons go. We're looking at 3 major TV networks that show cartoons. Cartoon Network, the cartoons. Everybody remember those?
Yep.
Nicktoons from Nickelodeon, and then Toon Disney. I don't think they were called anything special, but just the Toon Disney cartoons. So Cartoon Network. I watched a lot of Cartoon Network in my later childhood, not so much my very young childhood. One thing interesting about those shows is that I don't think any of them are specifically aimed at boys or at girls. They're very general audience, and there might be exceptions. By the way, I'm going to be making statements generally. There are exceptions to a lot of these statements, but I'm just talking in general terms. I can't remember any off the top of my head that are specifically for boys or girls. So there are 14 cartoons, original shows. Of those 14, 5 had female leads. That's 36%. Now the thing about our society is boys versus girls, it's about 50-50. I want to say, I think it's 51% female, 49% male, something like that, but let's say 50-50. And kids too, 50-50, but only 36% of these shows have female main characters. And only one of any of these shows have all female main characters. The other is a mix, boys and girls. And that is the Powerpuff Girls. Which, we recognize the lineage of that show, right? So Cartoon Network, 36% of their shows have female leads. And Cartoon Network was the best of the bunch. Toon Disney, 33% of their shows have female leads. Nickelodeon, it was 23%. That's it. And the thing is, this is counting both ones where it's just a girl or a group of girls as the main character, and ones where it's a group of boys and girls. Like, for example, Recess from Toon Disney had like 6 kids that were all main characters. But if you break that down, there will pretty much always be more boys than girls in groups like that. Like Recess, I think it was 4 boys versus 2 girls. All Real Monsters was another one. That was 2 boys, 1 girl. So if you go by number of characters, these percentages would be even lower than they already are. So, sorry, just try to find that page real quick. So going back to this idea, people want to see themselves in the media they consume. There's an idea, and there's a wonderful article, again, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it's called Dogs and Smurfs by Max Berry. He is a writer who has 2 young daughters. And he mentions in the article, I used to be like, yeah, we got this feminism thing down, everything's pretty good, right? I mean, it might not be 100% perfect, but it's mostly good, right? And then he had 2 daughters, and that's when you realize the world is out to get them. And of course, that's an exaggeration. But he talks in that article about the fact that male is the default. If you see an animal, for example, you can't immediately tell if it's male or female, it's male. If you see somebody driving, you can't quite see who it is, their windows are tinted, they're in front or behind you, you assume it's a guy. Male is the default. What that means for little girls is that little girls get a lot of experience relating to male characters because there are simply so many of them. And that's not a bad thing. I would say that's a very good thing. Little girls need to learn to relate to little boys. The problem is, it only goes one way. Little boys aren't given the same opportunity to learn to relate to little girls. And that's because there's this idea that they just can't. If you want to aim something at not boys or girls, at both of them, then you put more boys in it, because girls can relate to the girls and the boys, but boys can only relate to the boys. Because everyone here is, of course, aware that guys cannot relate to female characters in any way, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
I watched the show for Spike.
We'll run that.
So there's two problems. Statistically, it's more difficult for little girls to find characters to relate to just because there aren't as many. And again, it's not a bad thing for little girls to relate to male characters, but they should not have to relate to them because that's the only option or because there are no relatable female characters. I remember I was, I don't know, say 7 or 8, around there, and I was playing at my grandparents' house, and my cousin was there. He's the same age as me. And his mom let him watch R-rated movies at 8 years old, so he had a bunch of action figures from the Alien series, right? I knew nothing about that series at all. All I know is he had these action figures of these tough-looking space marines, and this big old monster, and one girl. One. And I got so excited because at 7 years old, I was like, oh yay, there's a girl who is tough and fight monsters. That's so cool. And my cousin goes, yeah, she throws herself in a volcano at the end and dies.
That one doesn't count. Part 3 does not count.
Wait, hold on, I'm going to get to that. Yeah, I've since learned that girl was Ellen Ripley. She's the main character of the series. She is totally awesome, and she does kind of get resurrected, cloned, whatever. The main point is that at 7 years old, I was devastated to learn that because here was the one girl. And at that age, I knew that there was one girl. That was the only character I could relate to if I wanted, and she died. All these male characters, of course they died too, but I didn't know that. But by the time I was 7 years old, that was ingrained into me that girls weren't generally found in these tough situations like monster fighting, and if they were, there was one. Lots of guys, one girl. The thing is, kids notice that. A lot of people think they don't, but they do, and it can kind of, these little subtle things, these cultural norms, you don't even realize you're picking up. They can inform you a lot more than you realize until you stop and think about it. Now, of course, this is all well and good. How does it relate to ponies? Because we are supposed to be talking a little bit about ponies. The thing is, when I learned about the Brony fandom, I learned about the show, and the show was cool, it was neat, but I learned about Bronies, and I was like, hold the phone. You mean there's all these guys watching a girls show, and they like it? This is amazing. And it's because one of the things about this whole, trying to figure out the best way to phrase this, because there is this assumption that girl shows will appeal, I say girl shows featuring female characters will appeal to a smaller demographic, just girls. A lot of times they aren't as strong, and this isn't always the case, and luckily it's gotten better. You know, it's not as bad as it was when I was a kid, but a lot of times the conflicts aren't as, what's the word, weighty or important, and the characters aren't as strongly written and varied as you'll find in a lot of shows featuring male characters. But here was a show that proved if you do female characters right, of course guys will like them because guys aren't immune to well-written characters. There's nothing that says they have to be. And if there is any lasting impact, I guess, from this whole thing, the whole Brony movement, I want it to be that idea that for girls doesn't have to mean less quality. If it is a quality thing, it will have an audience, and that doesn't have to be limited by demographic, gender, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's all about kids. Most of us in here, I'm not sure any of us in here count as kids still, technically. I'm not going to go around asking everybody. How old are you?
15.
15? Yeah. How about you?
I'm going to be 13 in October.
Anybody beat that? Okay. So, we're all outside the little kid range, I think. So, those of you who were in my panel earlier with Peter, we talked a little bit about gender, but I was kind of like, no, save it for my panel.
Yeah, you were saying that.
But one of the things we talked about, I say we, it was really more of the audience at this point, which is awesome. A little bit was about, kind of what it means to be a guy and why the whole My Little Pony thing is supposedly at odds with that. So I said, little girls have less people they can look up to, but guys, teenage and adult men, have less people they can be than women do. Like, I'm up here in my tennis shoes and blue jeans and superhero t-shirt, and it's not a big deal. A guy could wear this, I think, and not get a second glance unless somebody goes, wait, Wonder Woman?
Whataburger.
But I could also get up here in a nice flowy dress and makeup with my hair all done up and curly if I weren't lazy. A guy could absolutely not wear something like that without getting a second glance. And depending on the neighborhood and the situation, violence. Like, literally. I don't get it. Clothing can inspire violence because the clothing is feminine. And I think that's really the whole backlash against the bronies. I don't think I'm shocking anyone here by saying this. It's just because it is men doing a feminine thing. Now, the thing is, girls can do masculine things, usually without anybody saying anything. I say usually, there are some exceptions, but, like, I have never met any guy anywhere who didn't consider my enjoyment of comic books, generally considered a guy thing, a plus. They're like, oh, that's awesome, a girl who likes comic books. Guys cannot do feminine things without it being seen as a negative. And I think this comes back into play with gender norms again. There's this idea, really terrible idea, that femininity, the feminine, is somehow less or weaker or less desirable than the masculine. And the reason girls can act more masculine is because that's a move from the lesser to the greater, whereas if a guy acts feminine, that's a move from the greater to the lesser, and that's what gets people riled up. And that it's such a toxic idea, this idea that there's something wrong with femininity or being girly or anything like that. I've seen some things online, people talking about how My Little Pony isn't just for girls, and they do things like, this show kicks butt, and they show Rarity kicking the Manticore, and Rainbow Dash, and Fluttershy flipping the bear. It's awesome. And I'm like, no, if you have to defend the show by making it seem less girly, you're reinforcing the stereotype that girly is bad. And it's a bad stereotype, sorry.
Yeah.
And I think that relates to, again, why girl characters are underrepresented in cartoons. If a guy, a little boy, did relate to a female character, there are many parents out there who would freak out. I know that because there are many parents who would freak out that their teenage son is into a girl's cartoon.
Hoorah.
Yeah. But it's so bad because it's basically robbing little boys of the chance to learn to relate to girls in a healthy way by painting it kind of bad. There is, oh gosh, I can't even remember, it's slipping my mind. There is this woman, she writes fantasy novels with female protagonists.
Tamara Pierce?
I'm sorry?
Tamara Pierce?
Maybe. That sounds familiar.
Alana.
I'm honestly probably not going to remember it. But she writes fantasy novels featuring female protagonists, but not really aimed at boys or girls. And she says she'll get elementary school teachers who will read the book in class, and of course the boys are like, oh, I don't want anything to do with this, blah, blah, blah. But then they get really into it because they want well-written books. And she was telling the story about how she was at a book signing with this family, had I think 2 girls and then a little 9-year-old or so boy. And the girls went and got their book signed, and the author turned to the boy and said, would you like me to sign your book too? And the mom goes, yeah, Andrew, do you want her to sign your girl's book or something like that? And of course the little boy said, no, because just attacking that idea of femininity again. Okay, I'm getting repetitive, I'm sorry, I'll move on. But what I love about the Bronies so much is they just flip this whole idea on its head. Like, it's okay to like girly things. It is, right? We agree.
Yeah.
And we've needed that for so long. Like, not just, because it used to be girls are girly, boys are dirty and messy, and da-da-da-da-da. And now we're getting to where girls can be dirty and messy too. But we need it the other way. Boys can like stories about friendship and love and tolerance and all that kind of thing. And I'm hoping this is what that ends up being, like this moment. I'm hoping. I have my fingers crossed. Now this whole idea of the feminine being bad or less, not only very toxic, it can be very subtle, I think. And a lot of people don't realize that they're doing it. One thing about me is I really like comic books. My whole family knows I really like comic books. Anyone who walked into my apartment knows I like comic books from the mini posters and action figures. And they're totally cool with it. My mom bought me like 3 holographic framed Spider-Man posters. I'm like, wow, I don't know where I'm going to put these. But then I tell my family I watch My Little Pony, and they're like, what? It's a kid's show, and I'm a woman. Because things for little girls can't be enjoyed by the general audience, right? Like things like Spider-Man and X-Men and Transformers might originally have been for little boys, but it's okay to like them, but not stuff for little girls. And even in the media itself, like I sometimes get this idea that I guess back when feminism or something took off, you know, like I said, we used to be restricted to girls are girly, guys make the money and are violent and whatever, and now girls are like, oh, we can be all that too, and they're rushing over there. But now that the dust is kind of settling, and there's still people left in the girly section being like, okay guys, that's great, but we can still be girly, right? And actually, you can't sometimes without people looking down on you or talking bad about you for it. One thing about female characters, and again, this is just a generalization, there are of course exceptions, but generally if you have a character that, for example, is really into fashion or really cares about how they look, they will generally have other negative traits. They will be very vain or shallow, they will be stupid, or they will be a bully. That's a big one. The popular girls who are into fashion pick on the still totally, you know, well-dressed and good-looking nerdy girl that face palm. And when they're not, when you have like a girly girl who kicks butt or a bad character who says something smart, it's treated usually as a joke. There's humor in the dichotomy, like, oh, tee-hee, this girly person actually said something smart. And there's that idea again that the really feminine stuff is bad. It is a negative trait, even sometimes in shows aimed at girls. I've told a few people this. I don't know if anyone in this room, but Rarity is my favorite pony. I'll just put that first of all. And that is on 2 levels, because I like the show on 2 levels. I think I mentioned this at the beginning, but just as someone who likes cartoons and good stories and humor, I like it there, and I like Rarity for that. I still think her voice is like the best ever. But as someone who is approaching this from kind of a meta place, examining it, I love Rarity. Because she is kind of that typical fashion-obsessed character. She is vain, very so vain. She loves fashion. She hates getting dirty. She hates doing messy things. These are all very girly traits. But then she kicks a man's corn in the face. And it's not like there's no humor or dichotomy there. It's not like, holy cow, this really girly character is kicking butt. It's just, dang, Rarity, brave. Because Rarity is allowed to be smart. It tickles me to death that she is a small business owner. And I will say, just as a small aside, I love that she has a creative passion, and they show how much hard work goes into that. That she's a small business owner. I say she's smart just because she has to be to keep her business afloat. That stuff's not easy. She is vain, and she does examine how people look, but she's not cruel about it. She's not a bully. She's either very complimentary, or she'll have a gentle suggestion, maybe try this. Usually girls like that are the bullies who say cruel things to other people. Rarity is not. She's the element of generosity. And I've heard people say, Rarity's not generous at all. Where's that come from? What?
No.
No to what?
No to generosity.
Rarity has donated a lot of her time and materials to her friends.
But not her sister.
Oh. Little sisters, they're annoying. Of course, she doesn't embody it perfectly. None of them do. But I also think Rarity doesn't get quite enough credit, because she does work really hard, and she also does a lot of volunteer stuff for people, specifically that have to do with her business. This is how she feeds herself, keeps herself afloat, and she still donates her time and materials to her friends. So, I think, was it Lauren Faust has said that the goal of the show is, one of the goals of the show is to show there are very many kinds of girls out there. And I think if any one pony represents that the best, it is Rarity, because there is kind of a backlash against really girly characters, as we've discussed. But Rarity is one who shows, yeah, she's girly, but that doesn't mean anything negative. It's just who she is. I started watching the show a while back, but the episode where I fell in love, I literally had to make a Tumblr account just so I could make a post about it. It was Dog and Pony Show. At the very end, the message is literally, just because some pony's ladylike doesn't make her weak. And holy crap, how long did it take someone to admit that? And I guess kind of bringing this back around to the Bronies is, what I love about the Bronies is that they turn this whole idea of the feminine being weaker or less desirable on its head. Bronies matter because of that, and they matter because really in an ideal world, it shouldn't matter at all. And one day, my hope is that something like this won't be a big deal. No one will say anything. No one will worry about anything. It will be totally normal for guys to like more feminine things. And I say that both for the little girls out there who need role models, and for the guys out there who don't need crap for just expressing themselves. Come on. And that's really all I had prepared. Like I said, we started 10 minutes early, so it was about a half hour, and I thought we could just talk after that.
Nice.
So we have, I think, oh my gosh, You have so much time.
Should we get in line for the next?
I want your autograph.
We'll worry about that later. Sorry, did you have something to say?
Yes, I feel like Spike is a good representation because he feels like the typical position that you're in. He feels like femininity is lesser, but he wants to participate and he wants to feel accepted with the people around him.
That's good. So
Yeah, the tickets.
He was so excited about actually getting one, but he wanted to hide it.
yeah, that's a good point. See, I haven't thought about Spike very much, but that's interesting.
I mean,
That's interesting.
he loves Rarity.
Like when he came out with his little apron on, and then I think it was Rainbow Dash. No, because Rarity called him Spiky Wikey, and usually he's flattered by it, but it wasn't because she was complimenting him. He felt like she was downputting his masculinity, and that was when he had to go on his grand quest to find himself, and he realized who he really was.
Oh, the dragons.
And then, what's your favorite color?
My favorite color? I don't like that question.
All the colors of the rainbow.
I have to pick one. It would be orange, but honestly,
Yes!
I like,
So rigged.
yes, I like colors together. I do. The more the better. Look at my awesome shoes.
Whoa.
Neon shoes.
Neon colors for my eyes.
What wonder what Yes. Ray-Bans.
I like how the entire panel we didn't applaud at all for anything, but when we showed your shoes.
I don't know.
Shoes!
So they're awesome shoes. They are. I'll admit it.
So, ponies.
It's, oh, sorry.
I had a comment kind of what you're talking about at the beginning, how a lot of little girls can relate to guys better because there's so many more guy characters. And actually I found that with My Little Pony, it's actually one of the things that really makes the show stand out to me. I've had a couple people who they heard about the show, they kind of gave it a fair chance. They watched an episode, like, yeah, this seems okay, but I don't see what the big deal is. And it's kind of like as you get into more of the show, like you start to like you said, you start to see yourself in these characters. And I really agree with you, Rarity, because at first glance she seems completely unlike me. I don't care about how I dress, I don't care about fashion, I don't care about being nice and clean and tidy and everything. But you see some of the episodes, like you see how much work she puts into her dresses, and like that is something that I can relate to. And I especially like the episode Sweet and Elite because that's an episode where she's out of town, she's away from her friends, and she's trying to make a name for herself. It actually happened to me like a week after I went to a convention way out of the States. It was by myself, so I completely it felt so different to be able to see myself in a character that's on first glance so unlike me.
And like when I first started watching the show, like I'm a real tomboy, and I did go into a stereotypical thinking, and I was like, I was just happened to be on TV, but I was watching it out of the corner of my eye, and I figured I would just watch this episode. So the first episode I saw was Griff on the Brush Off, and Rarity doesn't get much of a part in that. But as soon as I saw her and I heard her prim accent and her curly hair, I was like, I'm gonna hate her. And like as I watched more of the episodes, and then A Dog and Pony Show ended up being my favorite one, and it was like I can't believe that I don't hate her because she wasn't what I expected her to be at all.
I also like the whole idea of Rarity's job focusing more on the business side of fashion rather than, oh, here's some fancy dresses.
Yeah.
I mean, it shows how much work goes into any form of creativity or art.
I do think that's a really good lesson. It's nothing to do with gender, but just that you can succeed at creative things, but you have to work really hard. Yes?
I also like how I think everyone at first, like when they first watched the show, and if they decided, when you decide, okay, this pony's pretty cool, I'll probably like her, or I don't really like this pony. And at first, which is why the favorite pony lists, a lot of us had that change as more and more, as we watched more and more episodes, because we got to see more and more of the characters, because all of the characters aren't just one thing. Rainbow Dash isn't just about speed. Rarity isn't just about fashion. Twilight isn't just about magic and friendship. They all have different traits, and not only different positive things, but also every character is flawed in their own way. And like all of my favorite ponies, I can tell you all their flaws, and I love them for their flaws.
See, I'll be right with you. That's an interesting thing to me from a character perspective, is yes, your character has to have flaws that makes them interesting, that makes them relatable. And this isn't a cartoon so much, but it's an interesting thing I've seen levied at, what was the name of the guy who did Knocked Up? You know, the guy. Judge.
Seth Rogen?
Well, he was in it, right? Anyway, comedies like that, the guys are goofy and slubby and irresponsible and things like that, but the women are not so much. They are responsible, they're hot, because God knows you can't have a non-hot woman in a Hollywood movie. But they're not as interesting because they don't have flaws. You need flaws to have an interesting character. And that is something I really like about the show.
I believe that was actually the intent from the start, to create flawed characters, because children's shows these days have characters that are so stereotypical and without flaws that as a whole, the cast makes up just a flawless character, which is boring, flat, and just static the entire time.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. It's definitely clear it was planned. You first.
And that's one of the reasons why a lot of older girl shows, especially the older generations of My Little Pony, were so, they tend to be rather boring. It's because many of the characters weren't as flawed as they should be. Flaws in any story is what you run the story with. That's how you create tales and adventure. It's by playing off those flaws in each character.
During the whole basic discussion where it was more so talking about the how growing up boys tended to have more male role models, but not many girls tended to have female role models. And I had to sit here quietly the whole time and without blurting out, "That wasn't true for me!" Because actually, my dad was almost non-existent. He wasn't a bad guy, but he was just always off, leaving me with just my mom and my sister was the older one. So it ended up most of her stuff. Well, yeah, she had the seniority when it came to whatever the kid stuff in here was. And it didn't really seem to affect me too much later until like teenager years, when I noticed that I was looking at what all the guys in high school were doing into, and I was looking at it and I was going, I don't like any of that, like at all. Why are you even into that? And then eventually, once all my other friends started getting me to telling me about, hey, you should watch My Little Pony. Okay. And I was looking at it, and I was constantly looking at them, and I was just looking at these people, and I was just all like. And I kept watching all the different personalities, and then it came to Fluttershy, and how she was nice and soft-spoken and all this stuff, and I'm just like, did someone spy on me? Because even now, I was just kind of meekly trying to put my hand up, and then just like, oh, someone else will go. That's okay.
You're in the back, we can't see you.
I'm in the back, no one notices me. But yeah, I was just thinking that it was kind of weird to hear that conversation, because I didn't have it the same way with that, and now I have all these, and I have a lot of feminine mannerisms, like, I know I don't have them on now, but I used to wear like martial arts. But yeah, no.
Did you have your hand up?
Roman.
I have something to say, but I can wait.
Okay. Well, if you want to say something, your thing first.
No, you don't.
Are you sure?